Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, let's go over the market. The market's about to close in just about 2 minutes. So let's just go over what happened, what we can expect and all that stuff as usual. Keep in mind, tomorrow is another important day. We have PPI coming out tomorrow. Just before the market opens, about an hour I think before the market opens, which is pretty important as well, similar to CPI, which can also dictate quite a bit. So all that being said, let's get into it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps a lot. And of course, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. Do your own research, make your own decisions, blah, blah, blah. But Tesla is seemingly closing around this level most likely, which is going to be putting us around $213.80 roughly. So just shy of $214. So, which is an increase of just over 2%. So we're in a very important area right now. So this is extremely pivotal moments, and I think tomorrow's PPI will pretty much determine if Tesla does move its way up to like maybe 220, maybe slightly higher, or if this is the top. And there's a few things that dictate it. So all that being said, yeah, so let's talk about it. So it's a pretty it's a difficult situation, and the reason I say that is because Tesla, I mean, again, first and foremost, just looking on the daily, right, obviously it has completely skyrocketed, right? That's number one, with pretty much almost no red in between, except for like maybe right here. But overall, it's been pretty much a straight rally and straight rocket ship, right? Pretty much over doubling in about a month and a half, which is of course phenomenal, right? So that's, just keep that in mind. However, you are making an argument, the fact that, first of all, you have a bearish divergence setting up, right? You can see we are going higher, but even on the daily, we are definitely not going higher. We're making lower lows. On, for instance, like a 2-hour chart, you can see a very obvious downtrend happening right here. While, of course, in that same time frame, if we go from where this starts, it's obviously doing the complete opposite, right? So that's, a very, very obvious bearish divergence setting up, which is, definitely something to keep in mind, right? That is a little spooky. But that's like the bearish take, and the final bearish take is the fact that you can easily argue that this is going to be potentially a double top situation right here. It possibly doesn't mean it has to be. It's just a possibility, right? And whether or not it breaks through this or not, it will determine that. So the market just closed. Tesla closed at 214 actually, and 21 cents, which is 2.37%, which is actually a little bit higher than I thought it would be, which is pretty good. But it's still at a very, very deciding and pivotal moment, because it's still pretty much closing right roughly where this candle is, right? Which is pretty much around 214. It's just barely above that, right? And you can see it did go above it slightly, but then it got rejected just ever so slightly above that. So, pretty much the way, what it would need to do is have this kind of candle continue closing, maybe ideally slightly higher, like ideally I would say 215, and have candles start closing there, and that will be ideal. But again, with PPI coming out tomorrow pre-market, and keep in mind it is pre-market, so that means if, let's say, it's bad or whatever, the market like goes red, that means Tesla will open somewhere probably down in the 212s or something like that, right? Which will potentially ruin this whole momentum. But if it doesn't, and if Tesla opens green tomorrow, if Tesla opens green tomorrow in the pre-market, that to me is a pretty damn good sign. It could be a massive bull trap. However, if it opens green, I do think that is a pretty decent sign, and a decent way to determine that, yeah, you know what, I think it seems like it's going to be going up that one extra level, up to potentially around like 220, give or take. And that is essentially what that would tell me. So it's pretty much at an extremely important and deciding moment, right? Can it break through this old resistance that pretty much stopped Tesla's rally from before, which it's just barely past it, I guess you can argue, but like it's literally on thin ice right now? Or is it gonna essentially get rejected, potentially play out this double top pattern right here, right? Again, you can see rally up, top, and then move its way back down, right? Or is that going to happen? That's the thing that matters. And I honestly think the easiest way to determine whether or not this is going to happen, and whether or not Tesla is going to continue with some extra follow through, which again, even if there is follow through, again, I personally still don't believe it's that much more. I think like best case is maybe another 10% best case. The easiest way to determine it is honestly pre-market tomorrow. Just in my opinion, look at pre-market. If Tesla is red, especially if it's like decently red, I think this rally's done. However, if it's green and Tesla pretty much like 9:29 a.m. right, like a minute before the market opens, let's say Tesla is green, like let's say 0.3%, 0.5%, something like that, there's a chance that as it opens, it will fall down, most likely to this level of 214, and then a pretty decent chance it'll just bounce, and then I think the rally will continue, and I do think that Tesla will most likely go up to around 220. But that's the easiest way. Again, TLDR, if it's red, I think the rally is done. If it's green, I think the momentum will continue for Tesla pre-market specifically. So keep that in mind. So that's very, very important, and it really just comes down to what PPI ends up printing. So that's going to be something that I am definitely paying attention to. On top of that, you can see SPY is potentially closing above this little area right here, which, potentially bullish. Again, similar to SPY though, PPI can determine a lot here, because if SPY, if the numbers are bad, SPY will be red pre-market, and then it will just completely make this massive bull trap, and it'll just completely close under this and most likely make its way back down. So it really just comes down to PPI tomorrow. But again, the most important things to note for now is the fact that, again, I want to make it very clear, even if we continue rallying up, even if Tesla goes to, let's say, maybe 220, 225, something along the lines of that, which would essentially be this red line right here, which I definitely think is possible. Again, green pre-market, I think we're going to the red line. Red pre-market, I think this is the top, and I think it's time to move our way back down and make a little, correction, if you will, from this little rally. So it really just comes down to that. But again, even if we do come up to the 220, 225 level, again, I personally believe that will be the major area rejection. I will most likely be entering puts on Tesla in that level. I'll of course assess it as it gets there, but there's a decent chance I will. Just my opinion, of course. And I do think that will be the ultimate rejection point somewhere around that level. And I think like absolute best case will be all the way up here at 230. But I don't think there's that much more room. So like I said, even if it gets to absolute best case scenario, which is 230 from here, 7.5%, or what I think is a potentially pretty likely scenario is only about a 4.5% from here. So very, very, not a very likely scenario for it to want to play out. However, the downside, in my opinion, from here is much higher, right? I do think at the very least Tesla will go down about 20% from here, which sounds insane. It's like, oh my goodness, there's no way. But I mean, Tesla in theory can go down 20% in like 2 or 3 days. In all honesty, the stock moves astronomically, whether it's up or down. So just keep that in mind, right? Tesla can do a lot of crazy things really, really fast. So just, never underestimate how aggressive and how quick Tesla can move, right? Because they can, as I'm sure we've seen here, and I'm sure we've seen that right here. But moving over to some technical indicators, you can see we have the 21 EMA still well above that. So ultimately the bullish trend is still there. The Bollinger Band is still expanding because, Tesla's of course still finding ways to rally. A lot of call buyers most likely still coming in. Keep in mind that, February 17 is a massive date of options being, expiring essentially, and that's where a lot of people most likely that have call options on Tesla, especially people that bought it maybe back during these times over here, most likely bought it for this Friday, because that is a very common area, right? People usually buy around the middle-ish of each month because that's usually where the spread is the best and most forgiving, I guess. And there's most likely a lot of going to be options expiring, right? So just keep that in mind. That means this momentum, again, even though it still might have some legs, that's usually a sign, at least in my opinion, that the momentum is most likely in this case going to probably stop, because that's where most people had their call options ready for and set for. So just another thing to keep in mind, right? But again, like I said, the most important thing in my opinion to keep in mind is just the fact that we're rallying, and while we're rallying, we're making a very, very obvious bearish divergence, which ultimately is a bearish thing, of course, which ultimately tells me that this thing is coming to a close. It's getting very, very close to finishing this rally, and that is definitely a possibility. On top of that, if we do come up to 220, that will also potentially make a head and shoulders pattern like this that will most likely set up, and then I think we can go like this, maybe back down like this, and then make our way back down like that is very, very possible. So that's something else to consider as well, which I can definitely see happening. However, on the bright side though, for the bulls, what they want to see, because again, regardless if you're a bull or bear, I'm extremely confident that I'm like 90% sure Tesla, regardless of what happens here, whether it's the top or whether we go to 220, will make its way back down to, again, somewhere around the mid 100s, right? Maybe 140, 150, 160, something along the general level of that, maybe even 170, right? But just something like that. I definitely think it's happening at the very least. But the bulls have a couple of things that they can potentially, play out and hope that, I guess, it plays out. There's two major things I'm looking at, right? The first and foremost is, regardless of what happens here, there's a potential that Tesla can come down to somewhere around this level, and then that would make essentially an inverted head and shoulders like this, and then we can potentially play that out to the north side, in the next maybe couple months or so. That's fantastic. On top of that, if Tesla actually comes up to, let's say, best case scenario, which is about 230, which would be right here, it could potentially form an absolutely astronomical, not astronomical, but a pretty decently large cup and handle pattern, something like this, which of course, if that were to happen, that means that if it does get to that level, again, in theory, assuming it comes to 230, which again, is not impossible, but assuming it does, right, would mean that Tesla will most likely retrace back down to around this 166 level, and that which is the 0.5, which again is one of my personal favorite levels to retrace to in the Fibonacci. Assuming the bullish momentum from this reversal stays intact, which I think it will. But from there, again, I do believe that it will essentially create the cup. Then it will make the handle, which will be that reversal to around that 160 to 150-ish level, potentially as low as the 143 level to gap fill over here. That's definitely a possibility, and that will be quite bullish. Or on top of that, you can also argue the fact that this could be just a simple, again, inverted head and shoulders regardless, which would, again, if Tesla comes up to, let's say, 230 as an example, for instance, right, that would be the neckline, and then the inverted head and shoulders would be something like this regardless, similar to what I showed before, except the neckline would instead be 230 as opposed to being something that would instead look something more like, this or something like that, right? Just, that's just kind of the way I'm personally viewing it, and that's the way I would personally, overall look at it, moving forward for the next, couple of months. But regardless, again, I want to make it very clear. Again, I could be wrong, but I do believe that even if Tesla finds momentum off of tomorrow, again, a green pre-market means Tesla most likely will go up to that 220 to 230 level. Even if that were to happen, I still think that the upside is limited, and I think the downside is substantially higher, regardless of what happens next. Just keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. That's just my opinion. Again, I hate sounding bearish. Believe me, I don't want to be a bear. I don't want to sound negative. I don't want to do that stuff. But I also just, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to, deny what I personally just foresee, and that's just personally what I see happening. So we'll see what that actually ends up being tomorrow morning. Again, very important. PPI, of course, at 8:30 in the morning, I believe it is pre-market. So could decide, most likely I actually will decide this market's next major trajectory and where we're going to go for the next, foreseeable future. But regardless, guys, that's what I'm seeing. Let me know what you think down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.